The distress beacon had been transmitting for 3 standard cycles when Captain Sarah Chen's salvage vessel Wanderer finally traced its source to the asteroid field of Kepler 442. What they found defied every protocol in the Galactic Salvage Guild's handbook. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Technician Rodriguez from the scanner array. "The signal's coming from inside that Class M asteroid, but the readings, they don't make sense." Sarah floated over to the console, her magnetic boots clicking against the deck plating. The asteroid appeared solid on visual scans, but the penetrating radar showed a hollow chamber within, and something alive. "Life signs are weak but stable," Rodriguez continued, his brow furrowed. "Whatever's in there has been surviving on minimal resources for... Christ, Captain. The beacon's timestamp indicates it's been active for over 2 years. 2 years. Sarah had seen plenty of crashed ships and stranded travelers in her 15 years of salvage work, but nothing survived that long in the void without serious life support. "Prep the mining laser. We're going in." The asteroid's shell cracked like an egg under the focused beam, revealing a chamber that had once been part of a much larger vessel. Emergency lighting flickered weakly along what remained of the bulkheads, casting eerie shadows over twisted metal and crystalline formations that had grown where atmosphere had leaked and frozen. At the center of the chamber, something impossible waited. She stood 8 feet tall, even hunched over as she was, her form encased in armor that seemed to be part technology, part living organism. The suit was a masterwork of alien engineering, flowing curves of what looked like chitinous plating interwoven with pulsing bioluminescent channels. But it was clearly malfunctioning. The lights flickered erratically, and a low, distressed humming emanated from the suit's systems. Most unsettling of all were her eyes. They tracked the approaching humans through a translucent faceplate, intelligent and aware, but filled with a desperation that transcended species. "Holy shit," whispered Medic Torres as she followed Sarah into the chamber. Is she trapped in there?" The alien's head moved slightly, the only part of her body that seemed capable of motion. Her mouth moved behind the faceplate, and the suit's translation system crackled to life with static-laden words. "Help. Please. Cannot move." Sarah had encountered dozens of alien species in her career, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The being before them was clearly a warrior. The armor was designed for combat, with weapon hardpoints and tactical displays still visible through the damage. Yet she was completely helpless, a prisoner in her own protection. "Can you understand us?" Sarah asked, speaking slowly and clearly. The alien's eyes locked onto hers, and the translation system processed her response. "Yes? Human? Please. Cannot remove. Armor fused. Dying slowly." The word human sent a chill down Sarah's spine. How did this alien know their species? And more importantly, how had she survived this long in a clearly failing life support system? "We're going to help you," Sarah said, though she had no idea how. "What's your name?" "Cathara, of the Hegemony Warcast. Was Defender Prime." Torres was already running scans with her medical equipment. "Captain, the armor's biosystems are integrated with her physiology. It's not just stuck, it's become part of her. But the neural interfaces are corrupted, sending contradictory signals to her muscular system. It's like her own armor is holding her prisoner." Sarah studied the trapped warrior. Kethvara's species was humanoid but clearly built for war, broader shoulders, longer limbs, with what looked like natural armor plating beneath the artificial suit. Her skin, what little was visible, had a blue-gray tint and appeared to have a slight metallic sheen. "How long have you been stuck like this?" Sarah asked. 2 cycles. Ship destroyed. Crew dead. Only I survived. Armor saved me. Now kills me." The tragedy of the situation wasn't lost on Sarah. The very thing that had preserved Kethvara's life had become her slow death sentence. The armor's life support was failing, but its safety protocols prevented removal, locking her in an endless cycle of barely sustainable existence. "Captain," Rodriguez called from where he'd been examining the chamber walls. "I'm picking up energy signatures throughout this section. The armor isn't just malfunctioning, It's somehow drawing power from the asteroid itself. There are mineral formations here I've never seen before. Sarah nodded grimly. That explains how she's survived so long. The armor found a way to supplement its failing systems. She turned back to Kethvara. We're going to get you out of here and we're going to get that armor off. I promise. For the first time since they'd arrived, something like hope flickered in the alien's eyes. You would do this for enemy? Enemy? Sarah frowned. We're not at war with anyone. Kethvara's expression shifted to confusion. But humans? The tales say, you are the death dealers, the species that knows only war. Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Whatever the hegemony warcast knew about humanity, it wasn't good. But that was a problem for later. Right now, she had a life to save. Well, she said with a grim smile, I guess you're about to learn what humans are really like. Back aboard the Wanderer, Sarah's crew worked around the clock to understand Kethvara's predicament. They'd managed to carefully transport the trapped warrior to their medical bay, where she now occupied the largest treatment chamber, still unable to move anything below her neck. Dr. Elena Torres had never encountered anything like the armor system. It's not just technology, Captain. It's a hybrid biomechanical interface that's been customized for her specific physiology. The neural connections go deep into her spinal column, her major organs, even her skeletal structure. Can we cut it off? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Not without killing her. The armor has integrated with her circulatory system. If we force removal, she'll bleed out in minutes. Torres pulled up a holographic display showing the armor's interior. But there's something else. The neural pathways aren't just malfunctioning. They're actively fighting any attempt at removal. It's like the armor has developed its own survival instinct. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb had been studying the armor's technical specifications. I've never seen anything like this design philosophy. Most species develop technology as tools separate from themselves. But this armor was meant to become part of the wearer. It's beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. Kethvara had been listening to their discussion through the chamber's translation system. You study my armor. Why? Sarah approached the chamber. Because we're going to figure out how to get you out of it. Impossible. Hegemony's finest bioengineers designed this. Only death removes warcast armor. Maybe for the hegemony, Sarah replied. But you're dealing with humans now. Over the next several days, the crew of the Wanderer threw themselves into the problem with a dedication that clearly puzzled their alien patient. They worked in shifts, combining their expertise in ways that defied conventional specialization. Rodriguez, the technician, collaborated with Torres on understanding the bioneural interfaces. Webb worked with both of them to map the armor's power distribution systems. Even the ship's cook, an elderly ex-military man named Frank Kowalski, contributed by researching every database entry they had on similar integration technologies. Why? Kethvara asked during one of Sarah's visits. I am enemy combatant. You said, not at war, but hegemony attacked your colonies. Sarah paused. When? 50 cycles ago. Maybe more. Stories passed down. Through Warcast? Humans fought like demons, killed millions, drove us back. Why help me? The timeline clicked into place for Sarah. 50 cycles would be about 75 years ago, during the colonial expansion wars. She'd heard stories from her grandfather about the conflicts with various alien species. But those wars had ended long before she was born. That was a different time, Sarah said carefully. Different people. And even then, we only fought when attacked first. You lie. Humans are death dealers. This is known. Sarah felt a flash of anger, then forced it down. Kethvara was working from limited information, passed down through military propaganda. What do you know about humans beyond those stories? That you cannot be trusted, that you make war on all who oppose you, that you show no mercy to enemies. And yet, Sarah pointed out, here you are. Have we shown you no mercy? Kethvara was quiet for a long moment. This confuses me. You should take my technology? Leave me to die? Claim salvage rights? Is that what your people would do? Yes. Warcast takes what is useful, discards what is not. This is efficiency. Sarah shook her head. That's not efficiency. That's waste. The breakthrough came on the 7th day from an unexpected source. Frank Kowalski had been studying the armor's nutritional systems, trying to understand how it had sustained Kethvara for so long. What he found changed everything. Captain, you need to see this. Frank called from the lab where he'd been working. The armor isn't just malfunctioning. It's starving. Sarah hurried to the lab, where Frank had charts and diagrams spread across every surface. What do you mean, starving? The biomechanical systems require specific trace elements to function properly. Over the 2 years she's been trapped, it's been cannibalizing its own systems to keep her alive. The neural pathways aren't corrupted. They're trying to conserve power by shutting down non-essential functions, including voluntary movement. So, if we can provide the missing elements, the armor should restore normal function, including the ability to initiate removal protocols. It was brilliant in its simplicity, but the execution would be anything but simple. The required elements were rare and dangerous to handle. More importantly, they would need to introduce them directly into Kethvara's bloodstream through the armor's integrated systems, a process that could kill her if done incorrectly. When they explained the plan to Kethvara, her reaction was immediate. No, too dangerous. You could die from exposure. Why risk your lives for enemy? Sarah met the alien's eyes through the faceplate. Because you're not our enemy. You're someone who needs help, and we can provide it. That's what humans do. Even for those who would kill you, even then, especially then. The procedure took 18 hours. Sarah's entire crew worked together, with Torres managing the medical aspects, Webb handling the technical integration, Rodriguez monitoring the armor's responses, and Frank ensuring the elemental composition remained stable throughout the process. Kethvara remained conscious through it all, watching with growing amazement as these humans, these supposed death dealers, risked their own lives to save hers. When the final element was introduced and her armor systems began to come online, the first thing she felt in over 2 years was her own heartbeat, strong and steady. But the real test was yet to come. The moment Kethvara's fingers twitched for the first time in over 2 years, the entire crew of the Wanderer erupted in celebration. She stared at her own hand in wonder, slowly clenching and unclenching her fist as neural pathways that had been dormant for so long sparked back to life. How do you feel? Dr. Torres asked, monitoring the bio-readings that streamed from the armor's newly functioning sensors. I can feel my body again, Kethvara whispered, her voice carrying a tremor of emotion that the translation systems struggled to convey. The pain is lessening, but even as her mobility returned, the armor remained sealed. The removal protocols, while restored, required a level of technical expertise that even the hegemony's own engineers found challenging. The armor's design is incredibly sophisticated, Engineer Webb explained to the assembled crew. It's not just protection, it's a complete life support system, a weapons platform, and a medical facility all integrated into one unit. Removing it safely requires precise timing and knowledge of hegemony bioarchitecture that we simply don't have. Then how do we learn? Sarah asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. As Kethvara's systems fully came online, so did her armor's data storage. 2 years of isolation had left the armor's memory banks intact, containing detailed schematics and removal procedures that were typically only accessible to hegemony technicians. I can access the data, Kethvara said, her voice growing stronger by the hour. But the procedures, they require someone to operate from outside the armor. Someone who understands both the technology and the biology. We'll learn, Sarah said simply. You do not understand the complexity. It took hegemony engineers decades to master one mistake and you die, Sarah finished. We understand the stakes. What followed was perhaps the most intensive learning experience any of them had ever undertaken. Kethvara, despite her own precarious situation, became their teacher. Using the armor's holographic projectors, she walked them through hegemony physiology, explaining the differences between her species and humans, identifying the critical connection points where armor met flesh. Your species learns quickly, Kethvara observed after Rodriguez successfully identified a neural cluster on his third attempt. Hegemony cadets require months to reach your level of understanding. We're motivated, Rodriguez replied with a grin. As the days passed, something unexpected happened. The relationship between Kethvara and her human rescuers evolved from simple patient and caregiver to something approaching friendship. She began sharing stories of her life as a Defender Prime, describing battles and campaigns that painted a picture of a galaxy very different from the one Sarah knew. The hegemony expands, always expanding, Kethvara explained during one of their study sessions. New worlds, new species to conquer or absorb. The Warcast, we are the instrument of that expansion. And you never questioned it? Torres asked. Kethvara was quiet for a long moment. Warcast are bred for war, trained from hatching. Questioning is not in our nature. Until now. What's changed? You, humans. Everything I was taught about your species, about compassion, about enemies, it was wrong. Sarah looked up from the technical manual she'd been studying. What were you taught about compassion? That it is weakness, that it leads to defeat, that strong species conquer weak species, and this is natural order. And now, Kethvara's armored head turned toward Sarah. Now I think, perhaps the hegemony is the weak species. The breakthrough in the removal process came during the third week. Webb had been working on understanding the armor's power distribution system when he made a crucial discovery. The armor doesn't just protect the wearer, he announced to the team. It enhances them. Kethvara's strength, speed, reflexes, they're all augmented by the suit systems. But more than that, it's been providing medical support this entire time. Her species ages differently than humans, but the armor has been actively maintaining her health, repairing cellular damage, even optimizing her nutrition. Which means, Torres continued, understanding immediately, that removing the armor isn't just about disconnecting technology. It's about transitioning her biology from an enhanced state back to baseline. Exactly. And if we do it wrong, the shock could kill her. Kethvara had been listening to their discussion. There is another consideration, she said quietly. What's that? Without the armor, I am no longer Defender Prime. I am nothing. No rank, no purpose, no place in hegemony society. Sarah felt her heart clench. You could stay with us. You would want a warrior without war? We'd want a friend. The words seemed to hit Kethvara like a physical blow. In all her years as a Defender Prime, through countless battles and campaigns, no one had ever called her friend. The Warcast had comrades, allies, fellow warriors, but friends? The concept was alien to her species' military culture. I do not understand this word in context. Friendship, Sarah explained, is when people choose to care about each other. Not because they have to, not because it serves a purpose, but because they want to. Friends help each other, protect each other, enjoy each other's company. Without benefit, the friendship is the benefit. Kethvara processed this for several minutes. Humans are strange species. Yeah, Sarah laughed. We get that a lot. As they prepared for the armor removal procedure, Kethvara made a request that surprised everyone. I want to record message for hegemony, to tell them what I learned about humans. Sarah nodded. Of course. Kethvara's message was brief but profound. To Warcast Command. I am Kethvara, Defender Prime of the 3rd Assault Fleet. For 2 cycles, I have been trapped, helpless, forgotten by the hegemony. I was saved by humans, the species we are taught to fear and hate. They risked their lives for mine, asked nothing in return, showed me kindness I have never known in the Warcast. Everything we believe about humans is wrong. They are not death dealers. They are life givers. Consider this when next you plan expansion into human space. The removal procedure was scheduled for the following day. But none of them could have predicted what would happen when Kethvara's armor finally came off. The armor removal began at 0800 ship time. Sarah's entire crew was present, each with a specific role to play in what was arguably the most complex medical procedure any of them had ever attempted. The process would take hours, requiring precise timing and flawless coordination. Dr. Torres took the lead, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the task. Neural disconnection first, she announced, as Webb monitored the armor's power systems and Rodriguez tracked Kethvara's vital signs. I can feel everything disconnecting, Kethvara reported, her voice calm despite what must have been an overwhelming sensation, like losing parts of myself I did not know were there. The armor's biomechanical systems had been so thoroughly integrated with her physiology that separating them was like performing surgery on two patients simultaneously. Each neural pathway had to be carefully isolated and disconnected, each biomechanical interface gradually powered down to prevent shock to her organic systems. How are you doing, Keth? Sarah asked, using the shortened name that had become natural during their weeks together. Strange. I feel smaller somehow, weaker, but also free. 3 hours into the procedure, they encountered their first major complication. As Torres began disconnecting the armor's cardiovascular interfaces, Kethvara's blood pressure spiked dangerously. Her body's rejecting the transition, Torres announced, her voice tight with concentration. The armor's been regulating her circulation for years. Her natural systems don't remember how to function independently. Can we compensate? Sarah asked. I'm trying, but Torres was interrupted by alarms from the monitoring equipment. Kethvara's biosigns were fluctuating wildly. Her enhanced physiology, deprived of the armor support systems, was struggling to maintain homeostasis. For a terrifying moment, it looked like the procedure might have to be aborted. Wait, Webb called out, his eyes fixed on the armor's diagnostic display. The suit's medical systems are still partially active. They're trying to compensate for the disconnection. Can we use that? Torres asked. Maybe, if we can convince the armor to gradually step down its support instead of cutting it off completely. What followed was a delicate negotiation with an artificial intelligence that had spent years learning to keep Kethvara alive. Webb and Rodriguez worked together, using the armor's own learning algorithms to create a gradual transition protocol that would slowly transfer biological functions back to Kethvara's natural systems. It's working, Torres announced after another hour. Her vital signs are stabilizing. By the 6th hour, the major systems had been disconnected. The armor's chest plates had been carefully removed, revealing Kethvara's natural form for the first time. Her species was indeed humanoid, but built on a larger scale than humans. Her skin had a blue-gray metallic sheen that seemed to shimmer in the light, and her musculature was dense and powerful even without the armor's enhancements. But it was her scars that told the real story. God, Torres whispered as she worked to disconnect the final neural interfaces. Keth, how long have you been wearing this armor? Since coming-of-age ceremony 23 cycles ago. Standard Warcast tradition, 23 cycles. Nearly 35 years of continuous wear. No wonder the armor had become so integrated with her biology. But the scars revealed something else. Evidence of wounds that would have been fatal without the armor's medical intervention. Kethvara hadn't just been wearing the armor. It had been keeping her alive through injuries that would have killed an unaugmented being. You've been wounded badly, Sarah observed. Multiple times. Warcast fights. Until death or victory, armor ensures. We can continue fighting, despite injury. The final disconnections were the most delicate. The neural interfaces in Kethvara's skull had to be removed with surgical precision to avoid brain damage. Torres worked with microscopic tools, guided by the armor's own diagnostic systems, while Webb monitored the power flow and Rodriguez tracked every biological function. Last connection, Torres announced, her voice hoarse from hours of concentration. The moment the final neural link was severed, Kethvara's entire body convulsed. For a heart-stopping instant, her vital signs flatlined. Then, slowly, her natural biological rhythms reasserted themselves. Her heart began beating with a strong, steady rhythm that belonged entirely to her. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked. Kethvara sat up slowly, moving under her own power for the first time in over 2 years. She looked down at her hands, her real hands, free of armored gloves, and flexed her fingers experimentally. "I feel myself," she said, wonder evident in her voice. "For the first time since I was young, I feel like myself." But as the euphoria of successful disconnection faded, reality set in. Without the armor's enhancements, Kethvara was physically diminished. Still larger and stronger than any human, but no longer the superhuman warrior she had been. The transition was clearly disorienting. "It will take time to adjust," Torres assured her. "Your body needs to remember how to function without augmentation." "I am grateful," Kethvara said, looking at each member of the crew in turn. "More grateful than I have words for. But I must ask, what happens now?" Sarah had been dreading this question. "That's up to you. You're free to go wherever you want. We can drop you at any station, any planet. Or you could stay with us. Join the crew." Kethvara was quiet for a long moment. "I know nothing but war. What use would I be on Salvage vessel?" "You'd be surprised," Webb interjected. "Your knowledge of alien technology alone would be invaluable. And frankly, having someone with your combat experience wouldn't hurt in some of the rougher parts of space we work." "You would trust me with your lives?" Sarah smiled. "Keth, you've been trusting us with yours for weeks. Trust has to start somewhere." The former Defender Prime looked around the medical bay where she'd spent so much time, at the humans who had worked tirelessly to free her, and made her decision. "I would be honored to serve with this crew." But even as they celebrated this new beginning, none of them could have anticipated that their actions had already set larger forces in motion. The message Kethvara had recorded was about to reach the hegemony, and the response would test everything they'd learned about friendship, loyalty, and what it truly meant to be human. 3 weeks after Kethvara's successful armor removal, the Wanderer was approached by a hegemony dreadnought that had been searching for their former Defender Prime. The massive warship, bristling with weapons and twice the size of any human vessel, sent a single message: "Return our warrior or face destruction." Sarah stood on the bridge, looking at the imposing vessel on their main screen while Kethvara, now dressed in simple human clothing that somehow made her seem both smaller and more dignified, stood beside her. "They're not here to rescue me," Kethvara said quietly. "They're here to retrieve military assets." "What do you mean?" "I know too much about hegemony technology, tactics, fleet positions. And now, I have spent time with humans, learned about your capabilities. To them, I am either an asset, to be recovered, or a security risk, to be eliminated." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "And which do you think they consider you?" Before Kethvara could answer, the hegemony vessel's communications array crackled to life. The face that appeared on screen was clearly the same species as Kethvara, but harder, more angular. Military bearing was etched into every line of his features. "I am War Commander Thector of the Hegemony 3rd Fleet. You will immediately transfer Defender Prime Kethvara to our custody." Sarah stepped forward. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Salvage vessel Wanderer. Kethvara is a member of our crew now. She's free to leave if she chooses." The War Commander's expression didn't change. Defender Primes do not choose. They serve the hegemony until death. "Return our property or be destroyed." "Property?" Sarah felt anger flare in her chest. "She's a person, not property." "Humans," Thector said with obvious contempt, "do not understand the proper order. Warcast serves the hegemony. This is law." Kethvara stepped into view of the communication array. "War Commander Thector, I am no longer Defender Prime. I renounce my rank and my service to the hegemony. The reaction was immediate and violent. Thector's face contorted with rage. Impossible. Warcast cannot renounce. You have been contaminated by human weakness. I have been freed by human strength. Then you will die with them. All vessels, prepare for combat. The communication cut off and Sarah immediately began issuing orders. All hands to battle stations. Rodriguez, get me maximum power to engines. Webb, what do we have for defensive measures? Not much against a dreadnought, Webb admitted grimly. Our shields might hold off their light weapons for a few minutes, but if they use heavy artillery… Captain, Kethvara interrupted. There is another way. Sarah turned to her. What do you mean? The message I sent, it was not just words. Embedded in it was tactical intelligence about hegemony fleet movements, ship designs, weakness in their command structure. If the right people received it, as if summoned by her words, the Wanderer's communication array lit up with incoming signals. Not from one source, but dozens. Human patrol ships, merchant vessels, even a few military cruisers were dropping out of hyperspace around the hegemony dreadnought. This is Admiral Martinez of the Human Defense Fleet, came a crisp voice over the calm hegemony vessel. You are in violation of the Galactic Peace Accords by threatening civilian vessels. Stand down immediately. The space around them had become a tense standoff. The hegemony dreadnought was powerful, but it was now outnumbered 3-1 by human ships that had been drawn by Kethvara's intelligence data and the Salvage Guild's distress call. Humans! Thector's voice crackled over open channels. You protect one who betrays her own kind. We protect someone who chose freedom over slavery, Admiral Martinez replied. The choice is yours, War Commander. Withdraw or face the consequences. What happened next surprised everyone. Kethvara activated the Wanderer's communication array herself. All vessels, this is former Defender Prime Kethvara. War Commander Thector, I challenge you to single combat. Winner takes all. The communication channels fell silent. Sarah stared at her friend in shock. Keth, what are you doing? Invoking old law. Warcast tradition. Single combat to resolve disputes of honor. You don't have your armor anymore. You can't match a fully equipped Defender Prime in combat. Kethvara smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from her. Who said anything about traditional combat? What followed was perhaps the most unusual challenge in the history of interspecies conflict. Kethvara proposed a contest of skill and knowledge rather than brute force. 3 challenges: technical expertise, tactical analysis, and moral judgment. The technical challenge involved repairing a damaged hyperdrive using only basic tools and salvaged parts. Kethvara, drawing on weeks of working alongside Webb and Rodriguez, completed the task in half the time it took Thector, whose reliance on automated systems left him helpless when forced to work manually. The tactical challenge required developing a battle plan for defending a civilian convoy from raiders. Thector proposed a standard military response: sacrifice the weakest ships to protect the strongest. Kethvara's plan emphasized cooperation and mutual protection, using the convoy's own resources to create an impenetrable defense. But it was the final challenge that truly demonstrated how much Kethvara had changed. Moral judgment, she announced. A scenario. You discover a member of your crew has been secretly transmitting information to the enemy. But investigation reveals they were coerced. Their family was threatened. What do you do? Thector's answer was immediate. Execute the traitor as an example to others. Kethvara's response was different. Protect the family, remove the coercion, and help the crew member heal from their trauma. A leader's job is to make it possible for people to do their best work, not to punish them for being placed in impossible situations. The human ship's crews, who had been following the challenges, erupted in cheers. Even some of the hegemony dreadnought's crew, listening to the open communications, seemed moved by Kethvara's words. Thector, faced with defeat in a challenge he couldn't understand, made a final desperate move. You have been corrupted by human weakness. You are no longer Warcast. You're right, Kethvara replied calmly. I am something better. I am free. The confrontation ended not with battle, but with the hegemony dreadnought withdrawing in confusion. Thector, unable to comprehend how his former subordinate had changed so fundamentally, could only retreat to report this unprecedented development to his superiors. As the human ships dispersed back to their regular duties, Admiral Martinez contacted the Wanderer directly. Captain Chen, that was some impressive work. Your crew has provided intelligence that could prevent a major conflict. And Kethvara, he paused. The defense fleet would be honored to have someone of your capabilities. Thank you, Admiral, Kethvara replied. But I have found my place. Later, as the Wanderer resumed its course toward the next salvage operation, Sarah found Kethvara in the observation lounge, looking out at the stars. Do you regret it? Sarah asked. Giving up everything you were? Kethvara considered the question carefully. I gave up everything I was told to be, but I found everything I chose to become. She turned to Sarah with another of those rare smiles. Besides, I learned something important from you humans. What's that? The strongest armor is the one you can take off when you no longer need it. As the Wanderer jumped to hyperspace, carrying its unusual crew toward new adventures, a message pod launched from the ship's communication array. It contained Kethvara's full report on human nature, tactical capabilities, and moral philosophy, information that would eventually reach every corner of hegemony space. The message would spark debates, inspire dissidents, and ultimately contribute to the gradual transformation of one of the galaxy's most militaristic societies. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. Sometimes, they're won by simply showing someone a better way to live. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.